The flashing red and blue lights washed over my quiet ranch, painting the familiar fields in an unsettling rhythmic glow. That Saturday evening, the peace was shattered by the low rumble of engines as 3 patrol cars rolled slowly up my long gravel driveway. Their sirens were silent, but the visual cacophony of their lights was an announcement in itself, impossible to ignore. I had been watching from the porch, and I set my heavy ceramic coffee mug down on the wooden railing with a deliberate thud. I walked toward them, my boots crunching a steady, purposeful rhythm against the stone path I had laid with my own hands years ago. The lead officer detached himself from the silhouette of his vehicle and stepped forward, his hand resting casually yet deliberately on his utility belt. Not on his weapon, but close enough to the polished leather of his holster to make a silent, unambiguous point. "Sir, we received a 911 call about suspicious activity and possible trespassing on this property," he said, his voice even and professionally neutral. "We'll need to see some identification." I moved slowly, keeping my hands visible and my movements predictable as I reached for the worn leather wallet in my back pocket. "Officer, my name is Marcus Chen. I own this ranch. May I ask who made the call?" He consulted a small notepad gripped in his other hand. The caller identified herself as Karen Whitfield, president of the Willowbrook HOA. She stated that an unauthorized person was occupying the property and refusing to leave. A faint, knowing smile tugged at the corners of my lips. Karen Whitfield, of course. I knew exactly who she was, though she remained blissfully unaware of who I really was. The pieces of this inevitable confrontation were finally clicking into place. "Officer," I said, my voice calm, "I purchased this ranch 6 months ago. I've got all the documentation inside if you'd like to verify ownership." I handed over my driver's license. "And just so we're perfectly clear, this property is outside the Willowbrook HOA boundary by about half a mile. You can check the county plat maps." My mind drifted back to 2 weeks earlier, to the first time our paths had crossed. A peaceful Sunday morning, the air still cool and carrying the scent of dew and hay, had been abruptly interrupted by an aggressive, impatient knock at my front door. When I opened it, there she stood. A woman in her early 50s, clad in a fitted blazer that seemed absurdly formal for the warm morning sun, clutching a clipboard like a shield and sword combined. Her highlighted hair was styled in that unmistakable, severe bob that screamed, "I demand to speak to your manager. I'm Karen Whitfield." "President of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association," she declared, bypassing any form of greeting. "We need to discuss your violations." Leaning casually against the doorframe, I crossed my arms. "Violations? There must be some mistake. This property isn't part of any HOA." Her eyes narrowed behind her designer glasses, scanning me and the interior of my home behind me with clear disapproval. "That's where you're wrong. The Willowbrook HOA has expanded its jurisdiction to include all properties within a 1-mile radius of our community borders. You'll need to register immediately and bring your property up to code." I kept my tone patient, as if explaining something to a child. "That's not how HOAs work, ma'am. You can't just unilaterally decide to extend your authority over properties that weren't part of the original development. There are legal boundaries." She ignored this and thrust a thick stack of papers toward me. "These are your violation notices. Your fence is the wrong color. You have unauthorized livestock. And that barn," she said, gesturing dismissively toward the large, perfectly maintained structure in the distance. "Don't even get me started on that barn. You have 30 days to comply or face substantial fines. I didn't take the papers." I let my hand remain at my side. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is private property, and you have no authority here." Her face flushed an angry, mottled red. "We'll see about that. I know people, important people. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." With that, she spun on her heel and marched back to her pristine SUV. After she stormed off, I did what any prudent property owner would do when faced with a clear threat of harassment. I invested in a comprehensive security system. I installed cameras at every strategic point, high definition, night vision capable with crystal clear audio recording. Something in her entitled demeanor told me I was going to need irrefutable evidence. I was right. The harassment began almost immediately. Fake violation notices, printed on official-looking but bogus letterhead, appeared on my gate daily, each one more absurd than the last. My mailbox was stuffed with threatening letters from the Willowbrook HOA Compliance Department threatening thousands of dollars in fines for infractions that existed only in Karen Whitfield's imagination. And then she started getting bold. One morning, I looked out my window to see her inside my property line, boldly snapping photos of my horses with her phone. "Ma'am, you are trespassing," I called out, making sure my voice was loud enough for the nearby security camera's microphone to pick up. "Please leave my property immediately." She turned toward me, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. "These horses aren't registered with the HOA Livestock Committee. Each one is a $500 fine per day," I sighed, keeping my voice even despite the rising irritation. "There is no HOA Livestock Committee that has jurisdiction here. You are trespassing. You need to leave now, or I will have to call the police." "You do that," she sneered, her confidence unshakable. "Sheriff Thompson is my brother-in-law. Let's see how that goes for you." But I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I meticulously documented everything. Every trespass, every fake notice left on my gate, every voicemail filled with thinly veiled threats. I was building a formidable file on Karen Whitfield. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly conceived, was that I wasn't just some random rancher she could push around. I was the Senior Vice President of Development for Pinnacle Property Group, the very company that held the master contract for Willowbrook HOA's legal services and property management. I was, in effect, her ultimate boss's boss. Things came to a head predictably when I continued to refuse to register my horses with her imaginary committee. That was the final straw for her, the ultimate defiance of her self-proclaimed authority. So, she decided to take her campaign to the next level by calling 911 and reporting me as a dangerous trespasser on my own land. So now, here I stood in my own driveway, surrounded by the flashing lights her call had summoned. The lead officer's expression shifted subtly as he ran my license through his system. His posture relaxed a fraction. "Mr. Chen, I apologize for the confusion. You're clearly the legal owner of this property, but we'll need to have a word with Ms. Whitfield about filing a false report." "Officer," I said, "I think I can help with that." I walked over to my truck and retrieved my laptop from the passenger seat. I opened it and queued up a few select clips from my security archive. I've been documenting Ms. Whitfield's harassment for the past 2 weeks. There's security footage, clear evidence of trespassing, and copies of the fake legal notices. I think you'll want to see this. For 20 minutes, the officers watched in a heavy, telling silence as the digital evidence played out before them. There was Karen, boldly trespassing on my land. There she was, leaving her threatening notices. There she was on audio claiming her brother-in-law, the sheriff, would side with her. With each clip, the officers' expressions hardened, their professional neutrality giving way to clear disapproval. "Mr. Chen," the lead officer said finally, closing his own notebook with a snap, "would you like to press charges for harassment and trespassing?" I considered it for a long moment, then offered a slight, calculated smile. "Let me make a call first," I replied. "I think there's a bigger issue here that needs to be handled at the corporate level." And with that, I pulled out my personal cell phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Janet, it's Marcus Chen. I need you and Richard from HR to come to my ranch immediately," I said into the phone, my tone calm but firm, leaving no room for debate. "We've got a situation involving one of our contracted HOA board members. Yes, Karen Whitfield from Willowbrook. She just filed a false police report against me." There was a sharp, audible intake of breath on the other end of the line. Janet, the unflappable president of our property management division, recovered quickly. "We'll be there in 30 minutes, Mr. Chen. I'm so sorry this happened." While we waited, I walked the officers through the physical evidence I'd gathered. Each fake fine, every manufactured violation notice, every documented attempt to extend HOA authority beyond its legal boundaries. They took careful notes and photographs, documenting everything for their own reports. True to her word, half an hour later, Janet's sedan appeared at my gate, followed closely by a second car carrying Richard from Human Resources. To my complete lack of surprise, Karen Whitfield was in the back of Janet's car. They had apparently picked her up from her home under the pretense of an urgent off-site HOA board meeting. The look on her face when she saw the patrol cars still parked in my driveway was priceless. A rapid journey from pure confusion to dawning dread. And when her eyes finally landed on me standing calmly beside the lead officer, her initial fear was quickly burned away by a fresh wave of self-righteous indignation. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with outrage as she strode forward. "Why am I being brought to this violator's property? There are criminals here." Janet stepped forward, her expression as cold and hard as forged steel. "Ms. Whitfield, are you aware that Mr. Chen is the senior vice president of Pinnacle Property Group?" The color drained from Karen's face in an instant, leaving her complexion a sickly pale gray. That's impossible," she stammered, her eyes darting between me and Janet. "He's just some guy who bought a ranch." "A ranch," Richard cut in, his tone as sharp as a blade. "That sits completely outside of any HOA jurisdiction. Yet, you've been systematically harassing him, trespassing on his private property, and now you've filed a false police report. Do you have any idea of the magnitude and seriousness of what you've done?" Karen's voice shook as she tried to rally, to grasp for the authority that was crumbling around her. "I was just doing my job. Protecting the community." The HOA board voted to expand our authority. "I have documentation." "No, you don't," Janet interrupted, her voice cold and final. "I've already spoken with the other board members by phone." There was no vote. "You acted entirely on your own, grossly abusing your volunteer position to harass and intimidate a homeowner who, I feel I must reiterate, is not even in your HOA. This ends. Right now." The lead officer chose that moment to step forward, his presence a solid official weight in the conversation. "Miss Whitfield, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor offense. You knowingly reported a fake emergency, wasting valuable law enforcement resources and time. I'm citing you for false reporting and criminal harassment." He began writing on a citation form. "This is ridiculous," Karen sputtered, her composure finally shattering. "I know people. My brother-in-law is the sheriff." "Former sheriff," the officer corrected her evenly, not even looking up from his ticket book. "He retired 3 years ago. Ma'am, you're looking at up to 6 months in jail and a $5,000 fine for the false report alone, not including any civil penalties Mr. Chen may choose to pursue against you." Richard cleared his throat, stepping even closer, his HR demeanor fully engaged. "Miss Whitfield, effective immediately, you are terminated from your position on the Willowbrook HOA board. Pinnacle Property Group is severing all contractual and professional ties with you. Furthermore, you will be personally liable for any and all legal fees incurred by Mr. Chen and by our company as a direct result of your actions." "You can't do this," Karen cried, her voice rising to a shrill, desperate pitch. "I've been HOA president for 8 years. The neighborhood needs me." "My vision, the neighborhood," Janet said firmly, cutting her off, "needs someone who understands and follows the law. Security will arrive at your home tomorrow morning to collect all HOA property, computers, files, financial records, keys, everything. If you attempt to access any HOA system or property after today, you will face additional criminal and civil charges." The reality of her situation hit her then, like a physical blow. Karen's shoulders slumped, her spine seeming to collapse. The clipboard she had clutched so tightly, the symbol of her petty authority, slipped from her numb fingers and hit the gravel with a dull, final thud. "But I was just trying to maintain standards," she whispered weakly. "A last, pathetic defense. By harassing law-abiding property owners and inventing rules out of thin air?" I asked, my voice calm but clear in the evening air. "By abusing the small bit of authority you had for your own sense of power?" I looked her directly in her watery eyes. "Ms. Whitfield, you turned a volunteer role meant to serve a community into your own personal dictatorship. That always has consequences." The officer finished writing and handed her the folded citation. "Miss Whitfield, you'll receive a court date in the mail. I strongly advise you to hire legal counsel." He fixed her with a stern look. "And if you come within 500 feet of Mr. Chen or his property from this moment forward, you will be arrested immediately for trespassing." As the officers escorted her, stunned and silent now, back toward Janet's car, I could hear her muttering under her breath. A stream of incoherent grievances about unfairness and how no one appreciated her vision for the community. But the truth had finally, irrevocably, caught up to her. She was facing criminal charges, thousands of dollars in fines, and the complete and very public loss of the authority she had so blatantly abused for years. Janet turned back to me, her face softening with a mix of apology and professional resolve. "Mr. Chen, I can't tell you how sorry I am about this entire unacceptable situation. We'll be conducting a full, top-to-bottom review of every action Ms. Whitfield took as HOA president over the last several years. I expect we'll be reversing quite a few of her decisions and refunding a number of improperly levied fines." "I appreciate that, Janet," I said genuinely. "Just make sure the next board president clearly understands the legal limits of HOA authority. Their power ends at their property lines, not where they wish it did." When the cars finally pulled away, kicking up a small cloud of dust in their wake, a deep, welcome silence returned to the ranch. The intrusive red and blue reflections faded from my windows, and the cool evening air felt still and clean once more. I walked back to the porch, picked up my now cold coffee, and took a sip. In the distance, my horses grazed peacefully in the twilight, unregistered, unbothered, and blissfully unaware that they had been the unwitting center of such a ridiculous, petty power struggle. 3 weeks later, 2 letters arrived in my mailbox. The first was from the district attorney's office. It confirmed that Karen Whitfield had pled no contest to the charges of filing a false report and criminal harassment. Her sentence was 6 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine, and an additional $8,000 to cover my legal fees and court costs. The second letter came from the newly elected and thoroughly chastened Willowbrook HOA board. It was a formal, written apology for the actions and gross overreach of the previous administration. Their internal investigation, prompted by my evidence, had uncovered that Karen had been systematically abusing her position for years, creating rules out of whole cloth, levying fines on a whim, and funneling the money into a separate account that only she controlled. The forensic accountants were still untangling the mess, but early findings showed she had embezzled nearly $50,000 during her 8-year reign as president. I set both letters aside on my kitchen table and stepped out into the warm morning sun. My horses lifted their heads briefly at my approach, then returned to their contented grazing. They didn't know or care about HOA politics, fabricated committees, or the fall of a petty tyrant. They were just happy to be left alone, to be free. Sometimes the best way to deal with a bully isn't to fight them directly, blow for blow. Sometimes you just have to let them swing so wildly, so high, that they end up hitting something much bigger and more solid than they ever expected. In Karen's case, she swung at what she thought was a simple ranch owner and hit her boss's boss instead. The last I heard, she'd moved 2 states away to live with her sister. Her reputation in Willowbrook was in ruins, her name synonymous with corruption and abuse of power. Her little HOA kingdom had been reduced to ashes because she simply could not resist trying to intimidate the wrong person. Her combined $13,000 financial penalty became an expensive public lesson in the nature of real authority and the certainty of accountability. It was proof, as solid as the ground beneath my feet, that power, when abused, always, always comes with a price.